Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. My friends, the whole house of cards is collapsing in slow motion, so get what you can while the getting is good. And I mean that. There is no hyperbole anymore. Everything is collapsing. Whether you work in the energy sector and you see the coming energy crisis on the horizon, whether you're a climate scientist and you can see the collapse of the food systems around the world, whether you are a military strategist and you see nuclear war on the horizon, perhaps you're an economist like Peter Schiff and you see the financial implosion that is just around the corner. Maybe you're an epidemiologist who thinks that the pandemics are coming. Guys, it's all collapsing. The rich are preparing, and you should too. Of course, we're going to be called the crazy ones, right? And I assure you that the people call us crazy will eat us alive when it all collapses. Now, here's my prediction. Because this coming energy reality that we are going to be facing that is going to require us to use a lot less is only going to pertain to me and you. It's not going to pertain to Leo DiCaprio and Kim Kardashian. They're going to be able to buy people's carbon credits. I think we're actually going to have a system where we're allotted a certain amount of carbon credits, and the wealthy are going to maintain their privilege and power differential by purchasing, poor people's carbon credits. And so the poor people will have a lower standard of living because they're going to be enticed to give up their carbon credits to the wealthy. And that's how it's probably going to work. But I've never been so certain that the future is going to be unrecognizable from what it is now to my children than I ever have been before. I mean, all things point towards that. There ain't much time left to get your ass off grid and start learning how to live a sustainable life, because soon we're not going to have a choice. I have that shirt that says, learning how to go off grid, because someday we're not going to have a choice. And that is the absolute truth. It's all coming. It's all crashing. So get what you can while the getting is good. We got so much news to talk about today. I'm talking about 50 stories, which are all pointing in the direction of the collapse of our society as we know it. Now, U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve falls to a 35-year low. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. It is, by October, they're predicting that the strategic oil reserve is going to be half what it was at its peak. Now, you might think, 35 years ago it was the same. How many people were there in the United States 35 years ago, and how much energy did each of those individuals use? The answer is a lot more. So this is an exponentially bad situation. They're not telling us this. Do you think they're going to tell us when the wells run dry? Or as Nathan Hagen says, when we hear the final slurp of the straw at the end of the oil well, do you think they're going to tell us when it's all going to go down? Hell no, they ain't going to tell us. They're going to tell us it's just fine right to the bitter end, and then they're going to put the screws into us. That's exactly what they're going to do. This is bad, okay? It's even more bad because Israel right now is running sorties into Iranian airspace as this nuclear deal appears to be falling apart once again. The U.S. has rejected Iran's counteroffer to, what did they want to do? They wanted some guarantees, some security guarantees that the U.S. could not back out of the deal like in a year's time or whenever, the government changes. And they also wanted, I think the U.S. wanted open ability to go and inspect and send the IAEA in there whenever they wanted. Okay, and I don't know if the Iranians were in full 100% agreement to that. Regardless, if the nuclear deal goes through, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. Israel is going to take issue with any sort of agreement with the JCPOA. I can't remember what that stands for, Joint something Political Action Committee, something like that. Anyways, they're going to take military action. And it appears as though the U.S. is going to kind of speak out of both sides of their mouth and support them in that. Now, is that going to lead to an all-out war? That is the question, okay? The question is the strikes that Israel might be preparing for against Iranian nuclear facilities, is it going to lead to an all-out escalation of war? If a deal falls through, the price of oil skyrockets. If the war happens in the Middle East, the price of oil becomes, I mean, you're not even going to see it. It's going to blow through the charts. Okay, they're going to have to change all of the gas stations to have an extra digit behind them. That's how bad it is going to get. Everything right now, a lot is hanging in terms of oil prices and commodity prices. A lot is hanging on this Iranian nuclear deal because they could flood the market with oil. Not enough, of course, to take us, beyond a few years, but they could drastically bring the price of oil down. But it's looking like these attempts may well be sabotage. So keep your eye on this. That is but one problem. That's the little news of the day. U.S. rents have hit a record high for 17 months in a row. Record high for 17 months in a row. And median rent is $1,900. $1,900 for rent. What the flip is going on? Whew. Germans warned of toilet paper shortage. The crisis on the European gas market could lead to a reduced production of toilet paper in Germany. We're particularly dependent on gas for the production of tissue paper. It's going to be a nasty ass future in the dystopian future that awaits. It's going to be nasty. So make sure you got your bidets. 1 in 6 homes are now behind on their power bills in the United States. Look at these energy costs, guys. Look at this. Starting in 2000, U.S. Electricity Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers. Is that going down? And guess what? The war hasn't even started yet. My God. But there's nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. Oh, except that Emmanuel Macron just came out and said, well, actually, the end of abundance is here. We're at a tipping point. They're calling it the Great Upheaval. I've heard it called the Great Simplification. What this means is that we're all going to have to learn to live with a lot less, except the people who can afford to buy the carbon credits off other people. That same day, Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo went much further, suggesting that the next 5 to 10 winters will be difficult. I wonder what happens after 5-10 years. Does everything just resolve itself? No. The implication there is perhaps that we won't be around. What we are currently living through is kind of a major tipping point or a great upheaval, said Macron. We are living at the end of what could have seemed to be an era of abundance. The end of the abundance of products and technologies that always seemed available. The end of the abundance of land and materials, including water. Everywhere there is drought. Drought, drought, drought. And look at this story. This next story here is so poetically tragic and symbolic. History is trying to tell us something. Some people call it the fourth turning, every 80 years or every 4 generations, civilization has to collapse and there's got to be war and famine and all this stuff. Well, get this. Dozens of sunken World War II German ships resurface along the Danube River as water levels hit a record low. Think about that. World War II ships resurface as water levels hit a record low while we are on the cusp of World War III and experiencing one of the worst droughts in history. If you recall, there was this thing called the Dirty 30s and the Dust Bowl. A lot of that was due to mismanagement of agriculture combined with high temperatures at the time. But what we're seeing now is going to be monumentally worse. We've reached a point of diminishing returns in terms of our innovations that are going to help us technologically MacGyver this situation. The end is nigh, I regret to inform you. And I'm not even being facetious about that. The end is actually nigh. Russia's wheat exports are projected to drop 20% in July and August. That is mostly due to sanctions-related stuff. Switzerland's going to slash its winter energy consumption by 15%. This is a message I got from somebody in Norway. Get this. We always have enjoyed cheap electricity here in Norway. We make much more than we need from hydropower normally. However, due to the price of gas, exporting of electricity to Europe, and the lack of rainfall in Norway, some of our lakes are 46% lower than normal. And remember, they're measuring that, I'm assuming, from the top. Maybe they're taking volume into account. Maybe they're just taking depth into account. If they're not taking volume instead of depth, then that 46% is a lot more. But they probably are, I'm assuming, because they're scientists, hopefully. However, due to the price of gas exporting electricity in Europe, the lack of rainfall in Norway, lakes are at 46% less than normal. The summer price of electricity is sky high, and the pending winter does not look good for those who have not fixed their price. They provide some screenshots here. The government is going to supplement people by paying their 90% of their electricity bill. Well, guess what? You can't get blood from a stone. Where are they going to get the energy from? Where's the money going to come from? It's just inflating the money supply. That's all they're going to inflate the money supply until the whole thing collapses, until the whole house of cards comes down. And by that time, you know that movie, Don't Look Up? Where that is the perfect example right at the end, where they're like, everything's fine, everything's good. That one little guy, he's like the tech tycoon or whatever, when right up into the last minute, he says, everything's fine, I just got to go to the washroom for a second, and they take off on their spaceships and they leave all of us to die. That's what's going to happen. I'm not being facetious, guys. I've had enough, because I really don't care anymore. I mean, all of these zombies who are oblivious to what's going on or just have their heads in the sand, they are going to be the ones beating down our door. And I'm not saying lose your humanity. I'm not saying don't try to, help others and to show them the inevitable reality that awaits. Don't be preachy about it. Don't make a cult out of it or anything like that. Be scientific. But at the same time, you just have to be realistic about what's going to happen when the store shelves empty, when crime goes through the roof, when the police don't report for work, and when the shizzy just hits the proverbial fizzy. All right? China warns of severe threat to harvest after hottest summer on record. I repeat, hottest summer on record. Its longest sustained period of high temperatures and sparse rain since records began more than 60 years ago. That's why they're stockpiling grain, folks. Worst heat wave ever. And of course, these heat waves are becoming more and more common. The biggest heat waves were in 2003, 2013, 2017. Lo and behold, 2022, the gap between these is significantly shortening, and this is going to lead to a mass displacement refugee crisis, the likes of which we've never seen before. I put up a job application for, or a job posting for the shop, and instantly, 10 resumes from people all around the world who don't even live here. This is just the beginning. Oh, geez. Environmental Canada issues air quality advisory for Saskatchewan due to smoke. That's the province I live in. Smoke advisory. Now, we've been lucky this year. In the last 5 years, every year it's just been a smoky hellhole. But this year we got lucky, because we had these atmospheric rivers pass through. And that started last year with the floods in BC on the heels of the worst drought on record in Western Canada. We experienced these crazy, crazy storms. And that has kept the fires at bay. But now the fires are coming back. Go to firesmoke.ca if you want to see a real-time map of where the fires are, where the smoke is now, and where it is going. The fires are raging up in the north. In fact, the fires are raging in Russia as well, but they suspect that it's sabotage there. Okay, they suspect that these fires that are burning, that are making Moscow smoky, I don't know if that's a sustained smoke or if it's just minor smoke. There's a huge, gradient for smokiness. We've had it here where it's just been so thick you can't even go outside. And then other times it's like a haze. You look off into the distance and it's kind of like, looks like smog, but it's actually smoke. But they got some big wildfires going on there. There's always crazy wildfires going on in Siberia. Methane bombs, all the rest. It's all going to happen. Tesla Neo charging stations go dark as China rations power. 50 million people in the regions of Chengdu and Chongqing have now had their EV power stations turned off. So they can't charge their EVs because they rely on hydropower for 80% of their power, and that can't be powered by the Yangtze River. So, the irony. U.S. gives the green light for a strike against Iran. Israeli F-35s made it into Iranian airspace, supposedly without being detected by Iranian or Russian missile defense. Apparently, I don't think the Iranians have the top tier Russian military defense. They may have been given S-400. I know they have S-300. I don't think they have the S-400. They definitely don't have the 500. According to authoritative sources, Israel has entered the final stage in its preparations for an attack against Iran. Remember, some people like living in this localized bubble where they think, oh, that's going on over there. You realize we live in a globalized world, right? We get our energy from one place. We get our stuff from another place. The labor comes from another place. So this is why we focus as preppers on global issues, because we live in a globalized world. I mean, it's just common sense. So I didn't even have to go on that sidebar, but fortunately I do for some people. Before the attack, we will likely see an increase in military strikes in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon against Shiite pro-Iranian forces. And that's already happening right now. They've also had some submarines enter Iranian's territorial waters. It's only a matter of time before, if one of these planes is detected, it's going to get shot down, and that's when the war starts. An unconfirmed report says that Israeli and U.S. troops are secretly preparing for strike operations in Iran. Now, think about it. This is the problem with negotiations and peace talks, is that all sides are always going to be suspicious that the other side is just biding their time. So you go and you put on the show, you pretend that you're negotiating. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, you are preparing for the all-out escalation of war. And both sides are doing this. And the Iranians are concerned that even if they do get this deal with the Americans, that they're still going to, like, it's not a guarantee, right? So, I mean, it's just a piece of paper. At the end of the day, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing, and the UN will do absolutely nothing no matter what happens. Russia is at war with NATO, state TV declares, and has no plans of stopping. What else is new? I mean, this has been going on for a while. We've pretty much known for the last 6 months that, you know, they believe that they're at war with NATO. The nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia has been disconnected from the grid. I don't know all the details of what is going on there, but according to the Energoatom statement, the site continues to receive power from a backup line connected to a nearby thermal plant. Energy experts worry that some of the site's safety mechanisms could fail if it loses all power. So they're disconnecting the Ukrainians from the grid as winter approaches and energy needs are going to go through the roof. Now, they're also saying that there was some blackouts in the region caused by wildfires that were caused by artillery strikes. It's another side effect of war is going to be forest fires. Whether sabotage or not, you can only have forest fires if the conditions are dry enough and it's hot enough to facilitate it. Major U.S. bank to wind down Russian operations. According to the Wall Street Journal, banking giant Citigroup will wind down its consumer and commercial operations in Russia. Just more decoupling. Putin, this probably should have been the leading story, but whatever. It's all in the same pile of SHIT. The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, with a surprise decree, increases the size of the country's armed forces by 137 soldiers. Now, apparently, a good chunk of the personnel in any military are not actually fighting forces. They're these auxiliary forces that offer other support. They do other things, right? They work in the office. They push the pencils, which is, you know, a vital part of the whole thing. Now, this is not going to be conscription-based. This is going to be done by contractors, these 137. Now, when we see the Russians pull the conscription card, you know that it's about to go down in a big way. Russia is also amassing air power, 400 to 500 combat aircraft, which have not yet participated in the war. They have thousands of aircraft, by the way. The U.S. believes the same, which is why they've ordered every American to leave the country, because they know what is coming. In fact, they are saying that the United States expects strikes on decision-making centers in Ukraine by the Russians within the next 24 hours. I believe this came out about 12 hours ago. U.S. and Ukrainian intelligence agencies have warned their citizens that Russia is likely to launch strikes on decision-making centers in Ukraine in the near future. Moreover, the U.S. intelligence community and the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine did this synchronistically, which shows the consistency of their actions, say Russian sources. Ukraine commits that they will seize all of Crimea by any means necessary. They're going to say this right to the bitter end. All collapsing economies, empires are going to say that things are just fine till the very end. Now, I'm not saying the Ukrainian empire is collapsing or it's an empire country, you know what I mean. But I'm just saying that governments are always going to minimize panic for the sake of continuity of government, because they think that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, which it kind of is in a way, but maybe not in the Gestaltist type of way. NATO may officially get involved in the Ukrainian conflict. Now, this is from a controversial news source. If you go to Pravda, there's a Pravda Ukraine version and a Pravda Russian version, and they're both pretty, on the edges of the spectrum, right? So if you find the intersect between them, that's where you might find a little bit of truth. But this guy says he's a historian who believes that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is going to be like a flashpoint where there's going to be some kind of catastrophe. The Russians will be blamed for it, and that's going to force the intervention of NATO in the crisis. Ukrainian women will be conscripted as of October 1st. Now, I don't know the extent of this, and I would encourage you to go and fact check this, but apparently women are going to be conscripted to join the military. Up until now, men between the ages of 18 and 16 have been banned from leaving the country and required to stay and fight. Women haven't been called into the army until now. So the situation, we're told they're winning still, so I guess they need those ladies to help them push over the edge or something. Yeah, so the U.S. is asking its citizens to leave Kiev. There was the whole Independence Day thing, and the thing that I've realized with the Russians anyways is they don't care about dates. They don't care about doing things on symbolic dates. If they are going to do a major invasion of Kiev, they're going to do it whenever they feel the timing is right. All this stuff about, they're going to do it on this day to make a point. They don't care about making points. They care about winning the war. Okay? They're objectivists. More billions to Ukraine. Of course, $3 more billion. I don't know if some of that I know is Lend-Lease. So Ukraine's going to be in this massive amount of debt. How it's going to dig itself out of that debt when a good chunk of its industrial sector and agricultural sector are no longer under its control, like the part of the country that generates revenue. I don't know what the plan is for that. I don't know what the plan is for that. But, smart people know, right? This is bad news. China is preparing for conflict. Politicians hand power to military. So basically what's happening, there's this thing called the National Defense Act, which has been amended, which is going to allow the Chinese to mobilize their forces more. Very similar to what the Russians did earlier in the year when they basically forced businesses to start manufacturing weapons. Well, the Chinese are doing the same. A particularly disturbing revelation comes from China. In July 2022, a Chinese businessman making medical equipment announced that local officials had asked him to convert his production lines in China so they could produce items for the military. Now, I want you to think about Germany in the 1930s. I watched one of those Data is Beautiful videos with the graphs, and they show like the bar graphs going up over time. Fun videos to watch. And I watched one about military might over, the last 200 years. And between the years like 1933, like when the Weimar Republic collapsed, and the beginning of the, I don't want to say the word because the video will be demonetized, Nizi Empire, 5 years is all it took for Germany to become the military superpower of the world and have military spending which far exceeded everyone else. Now just imagine when communist China flips the switch and stops making Walmart products, stops making PS5s, and stops making iPhones, and they instead flip it to military mode and they start building stuff. I mean, you've seen the colossal feats of construction that the Chinese can achieve in record time. Some people are going to say, oh, there's that old like China makes cheap stuff joke. Well, the China makes cheap stuff because that's what we want. China only makes cheap stuff because we're cheap and that's what we're willing to pay for. Okay, if they want, they could engineer stuff which is good. So I'm concerned that, we are going to see, because China is far, far more economically powerful. They have far more people, and they are far more of an industrial powerhouse than Germany was in WW2. So just imagine when they flip that switch, how fast their military is going to progress. It won't matter how much experience they have in war, because they're just going to have an unlimited amount of tanks, planes, warships to throw at the problem. Speaking of which, Canadian lawmakers have decided that they're going to send a delegation of parliamentarians to Taiwan because, why not? Why not put us in the crosshairs? China will take resolute and forceful measures against any country that attempts to interfere or infringe upon China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We have a very, very large Chinese population in the western part of the country, in Vancouver. So it'll be interesting to see how China-Canada ties are affected by this sort of thing. But guys, I've never been more certain in my life. Every single intelligent person who has a few digits behind their name, has a bit of money in the bank, and you don't have to have money in the bank to be intelligent, but they're all saying the same thing, that we're frogs in a pot of boiling water, and by the time that people realize that there's a problem, it's typically too late. Okay, we've already passed the tipping point. When prepping becomes really popular, which it is, okay, we're at the start of the curve of prepping right now, where it's starting to be adopted in mass, and everybody, bug out bag and bail out bag. I'm seeing these terms in like Walmart, on Walmart's website. So we're almost there. By that time, it's almost too late. When everybody starts preparing for the end, it's too late. So be happy you got in early. Be happy you are mentally aware of what is coming. Recognize that the life that we have lived thus far is not going to continue, that it's going to be significantly downgraded. I was talking to Rod Giltaca from the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, and we were sitting on his very modest, houseboat, right? He has a, condo, houseboat, lives a very, simple life for a person in BC anyways. And he was telling me, like my kids, they're not going to have this when they get older. They're not going to experience this for a variety of reasons. Okay, pick your collapse scenario. There's plenty to pick from, but when you put them all together, it's evident that our way of life is going to change drastically. And the promise of abundance, just like Emmanuel Macron said, I'd encourage you to go and find the original script of that speech, because that's it in a nutshell. And the people who have the privilege now within our societies are going to try to maintain it. They're desperately going to cling to it, because everybody is going to have to ration energy in the future. And there's going to be some energy rationing that's going to happen, especially when you have the developing worlds coming up, which is why, a lot of the developing world has been under the boot heel of the developed world for the longest time. Almost, it seems intentional now that I think about it, because once those countries industrialize, think about a country like Nigeria, who is going to have the world's greatest population if we can last this long, in the next 70, 80 years. But we're going to see a Malthusian catastrophe long before that happens. But imagine when they start using a few more barrels of oil per day. I think the average person uses 35 barrels of oil a year. And 1 barrel of oil can do the work of, what is it now? I can't remember the exact, but it's some astronomical amount of people. Okay? And Oil is being used, I'm quoting Nathan Hagen here, at 100 million times faster than it's being produced. It's being consumed 100 million times faster than it's being produced. And it really is the only thing that is keeping all of society together right now. If it wasn't for fracking, things probably would have collapsed a long time ago. If it wasn't for shale oil, we would have seen the collapse. And we're going to see it. So keep on prepping. Oh, yeah. On a positive note, we got a new product in, a Canadian preparedness. You know what I'm doing, guys? I'm taking any money I have and I'm putting it into the store because the value of the dollar is nosediving. I'm talking about nosediving. Every month, the money in your bank is worth less. So, buy preps. Anyways, we got lots of cheesy chicken and broccoli, Peak Refuel. Delicious. I ate one this morning. Admittedly, I eat Peak Refuel 3 or 4 times a week. But man, this is delicious. And there's 1,090 calories in. Hearty serving. I mean, if we're talking survival, like bare bones, just staying alive, and if you got an ample amount of fat stores and maybe a little bit of muscle on you, 1,090 calories if you were sedentary could keep you going. It's not going to be enough to keep you alive. Eventually, you're going to need more, but this stuff is delicious. And if you can't afford Peak Refuel, get your beans, bullets, Band-Aids, anything you buy now from the store. And once people realize this is important to note. Once people realize that the value of their dollar is diminishing and they go out to try to buy stuff while they can, imagine the pressure that's going to put on the demand in the supply chain. It's going to be crazy. The prices are going to skyrocket. Okay, never mind inflation. We're talking about demand. The market's not going to be able to keep up with it. I'm starting to sound like Peter Schiff, except Peter believes that, the market's going to fix things. I don't think the free market's going to be able to fix things. That's the problem, is that we really are approaching the limits of the energy we can produce. And that's the foundation of the economy, is energy. Anyways, I've rambled on long enough. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Go check out that video we did with Peter Schiff. Uploaded it yesterday. Very knowledgeable guy. Obviously, he's a bit of a gold bug, but, people get into what they're passionate about, and then they try to market it. And then, the money comes after that. Everybody just assumes that, people start a YouTube channel to make money. No, when I first started this YouTube channel, it was just me talking to a black screen for years. I just basically, there was no monetization, nothing like that. When you're passionate about something, eventually there's a way to monetize it, right? But everybody always assumes that the cart comes before the horse. No, Peter didn't get into gold to start making money off it. I'm sure he could have went into anything. He went into gold because he realizes that the system is bound to collapse, which it is. So anyways, I just said I wasn't going to ramble on. That's it. That's all I'm giving you today. Stay safe, Canadian Prepper out.